Greetings and welcome to another fun-filled, fantastic episode of One Path to Wealth. I am your host, the Hebrew Hammer, Jeremy Dicker, with my co-host, Peter Hoopis. What is going on, Pete? How are you today, buddy?
I am doing well. We're cold here. It's like -8 degrees in Chicago, so trying to stay warm.
Well, as I've said this to you many times before, when you reach the age of 18, you get to make this decision. You do know that, right?
I do.
All right, just making sure you understand that you do not have to put yourself through this degree of pain and suffering. You've got optionality, but I guess you're a glutton for punishment.
Apparently so. Arizona sounds pretty good right now.
It's pretty good. I mean, we were cold. We're 36, but it gets to a nice, 72, and then it drops back down. Clear blue skies, just a very, very happy place to be, Pete.
It sounds like it. But look, I wanted to follow up. I was thinking about last episode, and we were talking about the sudden influx of wealth, and it got me going down a little bit of a path on estate planning. And, I was thinking, okay, what happens after all that? And I said, but why don't we put together an idea and just talk a little bit about some general, high-level estate planning topics as it might relate to what we do and the people that you're seeing. How does that sound for today?
It's great. Let's do it.
So just give me a high level. When people talk about estate planning, I think they're usually just thinking like ultra wealthy or, at death, or they may have something preconceived in their head. So why don't you just give me a super high level, very, very basic. I mean, we're not attorneys here, but I just want to talk high level. What does estate planning mean to you when you're talking about it with your clients?
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, definitely not attorneys. We don't play them on TV. No, we don't play doctors on TV or CPAs. We try to do the best job we can for our clients. But it is our job to help give some guidance. So just around estate planning, I think oftentimes people confuse the word estate planning with I've got to have a massive amount of wealth. I've got to be John D. Rockefeller, Elon Musk, or Zuckerberg, or some such thing. And the reality is those estates require a whole different can of worms. And that's a whole different set of planning requirements along the way, making difficult decisions around intergenerational wealth planning. How do you want your kids' to be treated over a period of time with the wealth that you've amassed? But from a basic level, from a tactical basic level, if you've got children, or if you're married and you've got no children, or if you're single and you've got some means and have very specific designs on what you'd like that to look like if you were no longer here, then it's very, very important to have basic things in place like a living will, power of attorney, a living trust, directives from a health perspective. What is that health directive? Meaning, if your spouse or significant other would choose to leave you on life support forever because they can't imagine life without you, and they're going to drain all of your capital resources to ensure that you're there forever, even though you've got that bedpan and you're certainly not going to come back being the person that you were. That may not be what you want to have happen. So in the event that it is not, it's important to control what you want to have happen from beyond. And there are things you can do to do that with your health directives and your powers of attorney. Specificity in your wills and living trust documents are very, very important. Keeping a very strong consideration as to what you want to have happen, charitably or for specific people. When my grandparents died, in fact, they didn't have a lot of money, but they had a little bit of money. And when they passed away, they had 4 kids and a bunch of grandkids, and they gave 80% of the estate to the 4 kids, 20% to the grandkids to be divided evenly. But what was interesting is the house had lots of mementos and historical things and books and all kinds of things inside the house. So they did an oldest to youngest, youngest to oldest round robin. So the oldest got to go in one time, go through the house, pick out a thing or two that they wanted, a memento or something that meant something to them. And that went down from the oldest to the youngest. And then the youngest got to start the next round, and it finished with the oldest. And it was done 2 times, and that was it. And then whatever else was there was sold off in an estate sale. But the idea there was my grandparents did not want there to be any infighting with the kids, the grandkids. They wanted to have it be as diplomatic as possible so that certainly things that were really, really meaningful and important they could do. But again, these are not super complicated things, right? These are things that you can paper pretty quickly and easily. Get some buy-in. Certainly one of the big components and the most important things about estate planning, Pete, in my experience, is making sure that you've had lots of conversations along the way. To the extent that you've done a good job of building wealth and have got some means, it's very important that in addition to drafting these very important legal documents, that you're also talking about it along the way. That you're talking to your kids, your spouse, your charities, your synagogues, your churches, your schools. And there's a high degree of clarity as it relates to what you intend to have happen. So I think when we think about it in terms of very, very simple terms, just to reiterate what we've just spoken about, got to have a will, got to have that power of attorney. Definitely that healthcare proxy, that living will, being very specific about, the medical requests. I know, Pete, you want me to live forever, so you've made arrangements for my head to be preserved in a gigantic, because I do have a big head, a gigantic glass cube, so you can stare at me forever. So to the extent that that's important, you can make those arrangements to ensure that those kind of things happen. And then obviously making sure that you've got trusts that are in place with an overview sheet. So look, a trust can be a very complicated document. So it's very important that you create something that is the trust, of course, but a document that's easy and simple to follow. And then lastly, making sure that you've identified who your trustees are, who the important people are in your life, not necessarily just your spouses, but those important individuals in your life that are going to help make those difficult decisions down the road should that time come. And then making sure that everybody knows where everything is, right? A digital copy of your estate plan, your wills, your trusts, a paper copy to the extent you want to have that in a secure, safe location. Obviously, your attorney should have a copy once it's been executed. So those kinds of things are tactical. But yes, estate planning does not need to be complicated. It is hard. Asking yourself questions about what you want to have happen to your assets and for your kids, it's hard. But it does not need to be complicated.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of points you brought up in there, right? And you mentioned trusts and the will and power of attorney, all that, right? I mean, that's where I think people get held up with it, especially trust, right? I think trust typically signifies extreme wealth, right? And I don't need a trust. I don't have that kind of money, right? But I think there's maybe not enough understanding on what that trust can do. Having a living trust set up, holding assets in it, and it doesn't have to be significant inside that. Now, I know a lot of times you're talking with people that have significant net worth. So what are you suggesting in terms of trust and what's held in it, or how are they funding those different trusts?
So it's interesting. I'll go down two very unique paths. So we have a client and a friend whose husband passed away, made a living trust that had all of their assets, their real estate, their retirement plan, beneficiaries, their miscellaneous things, the cars, art, not a huge estate, good income earners, 2 children, and the husband passed away suddenly at age 45 of a heart attack. So making sure that document had been executed in a way that was consistent with what they wanted to have happen for both the kids. And then ultimately going over and above that, ensuring that there was enough insurance prior to the death to retire any outstanding liabilities or provide for enough cash for those boys and girls to, go to ballet and keep the private baseball lessons and the football and all the things that they've grown accustomed to doing. Because when there's a death, the last thing you want to have happen is have a significant change in lifestyle. It's difficult enough to lose a loved one, any loved one. It's difficult enough. The last thing you want to do is impart even more challenge by creating financial difficulties, by not knowing where things are. So by putting together a proper estate plan with the basics, a living trust and a will, and again, state dependent, there are different rules based on the states that you live in, but understanding what those documents say, being clear about what wishes would look like, who gets what, should both individuals pass away, but even if there's just one, making sure that it's very specific, very itemized, and everybody's got a high degree of clarity. That's on the basic side. Then I had a conversation with a very dear friend who is pretty wealthy, inherited quite a bit of money, and their parent, one of the parents, had an injury. Very wealthy, successful individual, and that injury has led to all kinds of questions and The parent, fortunately, is going to recover and he's going to be okay, but there's a long road ahead. So that got my friend really thinking about what that meant to her. What do they need to be doing on an ongoing basis to ensure that the father's wishes are being honored, that they have things structured and set up in the proper format and proper way so that the children receive what they're to receive. The children's children potentially will receive what they should receive, that the kids don't become assholes. They don't become spoiled, entitled people that we all know so well can happen when there's extreme wealth. Looking at language in the trusts like ascertainable standards, where it has health, maintenance, education, support language in there. God forbid there's a medical emergency or a medical problem, the trust can provide for that. Maintenance, making sure that the maintenance requirements from an economic perspective are taken care of. Property taxes and all of the miscellaneous things, making sure the lifestyle doesn't necessarily change. Education, should the spouse or the parent need to go get some additional education to continue their career, or the kids, their college, private schools, things like that, making sure that's there. And then lastly, support, making sure that there is additional economic support, God forbid that something was to happen, and it's all outlined very specifically. But in that person's individual world, there's a lot of money there. So the question then becomes, are there ways, are there mechanisms that we can leave significant resources to the next generation that's yet to be defined? And I was reminded of, and I reminded my dear friend of the Rockefeller strategy. And Pete, you and I have recently spoken quite a bit about that strategy, but it's a unique one from the standpoint that John D. Rockefeller, 100 plus years ago, wanted to ensure that all of his children and his children's children never paid any estate tax, or as little tax as possible, I should say. You always pay estate tax, but to minimize the tax to the extent that they could. So they created a series of irrevocable trusts for generational wealth planning that had waterfall provisions in it that would allow for the heirs to access their trust assets for a series of things, whether it be building a business, being the next Google or Microsoft, or creating something that was game-changing, world-changing, the ability for them to own a home to the extent that they choose to be a social worker and are making a modest income, but are doing great things for society, and they wanted to ensure that that individual child or heir could live in a house that they grew accustomed to living in, and that there was enough resource or sufficient resources to provide for the property taxes, the maintenance of that estate, and so on. And this waterfall, this cascading has been going on for 100 years. And these kids now have largely done incredibly good things with the money that their great-great-great-great-grandfather provided so many years ago. So what I think is important is that as very high net worth individuals start thinking about estate planning, wealth preservation, it's not just about today. It's not just about the next in line, the next generation, but it can be about what you want so much more. All these different options that you can create. Putting not that this is important, by the way, some people it is, but putting your name on a building, putting your name on a college campus or high school campus or synagogue or church. And not for the purposes of a name, but for the purposes of, hey, I did this because this institution was important to me, helped me be me. So I want to acknowledge that, and I want people to know that I went here so they know that a really successful person came from here, was able to build this wing with some of the planning that had been done, and so on. So I think, today, as we are in 2025 and the estate tax sunsets at the end of this year, we'll see if it actually does with the current administration, or they extend some of those tax exemptions. But to the extent they don't, the estate tax exemptions all fall off at the end of this calendar year. So we're having lots and lots of conversations with clients about, look, if they do, here's what you need to consider. If they don't, here's what you need to be considering. What have you done over the last several years about gifting to your kids and your kids' kids? Is that important to you? Have you put everything in trust in a method that is consistent with your and your spouse or significant other's goals and objectives? And then finally, what degree of comfort do you want to ensure is provided for the next generation? So there's lots of things. And what I think, Pete, what we do every day is we talk about the conversation that one needs to have, right? It's all about having a conversation about expectations, what it is you want to have happen, what are some of the common misconceptions around needing an estate plan or a will or a trust, understanding what it is that you're really trying to have happen. And then obviously, to the extent insurance is warranted, making sure that there's enough life insurance in there to ensure that whatever estate tax liability, whatever that might be, is protected. To the extent that's important, because it's not always important to all people. But if you don't like the idea of the government being your business partner, and I certainly don't, then it's important to put in place these planning techniques to ensure that the business partner you have is the one you want.
All right.
So I think those are a few things I'd be considering as we talk through this.
Yeah. So a couple things you mentioned in there, right? Talking about life insurance inside or using it in the estate plan. And you talked about the trust document, having the trust, revocable living trust. So I think a lot of times we'll hear, right? I've created so much wealth. I don't need the insurance. Why bother, right? I've got $100 million. Everyone's going to be okay. Right. There's plenty to go around. I mean, what would you do in that situation? Again, very high level. Each person's situation is very different. There's a lot of things that are going on internally. We don't know exactly where that net worth is, but in general, right? What would you say when someone says that to you?
Yeah, for sure. So here's the first thing. Number one, there's a big difference between needs and wants. I've talked about that and with your dad, Benny, for years, with Harry for years. There's a big difference between needs and wants. You need to breathe air. You need to eat food, right? You need to drink water. I want to have a steak. I want to have that really nice glass of wine. I want to drive that car. I want to fly first class or business class, right? I want to go to Hawaii. Those are wants. I don't need to do any of those things, but I want them, right? And estate planning is the exact same thing. I don't need to provide any more than what my kids are already going to get net of taxes. I don't need to. But I want to ensure that all the things that I've built and worked so hard for so many years is left intact. I want this massive real estate portfolio that I've built over the last 2 or 3 decades remains in the family forever. I want the Yankees, as George Steinbrenner did, to be passed down to the generations forever so that it remains in my family's business, on my family's best interest, my family's ownership. I want the Lakers, as Jerry Buss did, to transition to the next generation without any concern of sale to retire the estate tax balances. Those are all wants, right? Those are not needs. You certainly don't need to. You could sell the Yankees for billions of dollars, pay the tax, and everybody's going to be just fine. You could do the same with the Lakers. Pick a family that has significant wealth that doesn't need to do any of that stuff. But pick a family also that has chosen to ensure that all the things they've built, they've created, they've wanted, they've designed for so many years remains in their family forever. It reminds me, Pete, have you been watching Yellowstone?
Yeah. Yep.
Taylor Sheridan's one of his. It's funny. I think Taylor Sheridan is the only person writing anything right now. Right? Tulsa King, yep. Landman, Lion. Everything. It seems like everything on TV is by Taylor Sheridan. But when you think of John Dutton in that episode, that final episode of the last season, and them giving away all the real estate and all the stuff that his family had created for generations, 100 years. And I read an article in the Journal, I forget, maybe it wasn't the Journal, it was some magazine, a periodical that talked about if John Dutton had life insurance to pay the estate taxes, how would the show have finished differently? Right? And it isn't wrong, right?
Right.
Would John Dutton have wanted this family ranch that had been in his family for generations and generations that they fought tooth and nail for to create? Would he have wanted that to have been given away and broken up? Now, again, we'll never know the answer, and I'm not Taylor Sheridan, and he's more creative, handsomer, and smarter than me. But here's although someone did say I look like him the other day, by the way. I don't know if I told you that, but I don't see the resemblance.
We'll have to check that out.
But the question is, that's a real question, right? If you want what you've created to remain intact for the generations that come after us, then you have to do things, whether it be giving away a big chunk of it while you're alive and losing that control, because that's a big deal for entrepreneurs. Do I want to lose all that control now while I'm young at age 50 or 55 or 60? And a lot don't. Or do I want to put in place instruments that allow me to retire the estate tax liability, or allow my children, I should say, to retire that estate tax liability in the most efficient manner possible with no concern and very easy? And if I'm, God willing, healthy enough to buy the insurance, just buy an insurance policy, call it a day, stick it in a trust. If you've got that $100 million estate, you got a $50 million liability, all round numbers again. Why not just own some insurance that's $50 million, pay for it over a 10-year period of time, sits in a trust for the generations to come. When that day comes, that trust explodes with cash, an insurance trust or a SLAT explodes with cash, pays off the estate tax, rinse and repeat. Now, all the things that you've created, the Yankees dynasty, the real estate, John Dutton's Yellowstone Ranch, the Lakers, go down the list. It all remains. And John D. Rockefeller did exactly that, right? 100 years ago, it was very, unique and did just that. But I think that's more important than, to me. And again, everybody's got their own perspective, and nobody's wrong. But the real answer to me is, and coming back to your original point is, and what we say to all of our clients, what's important to you? Like, if it's important to keep it all intact, these are some things we can do. If it's not important, don't do it. Have your living trust or your will. That's 15 grand, probably 20 grand to do, and call it a day.
Yeah. And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand. You can use Yellowstone or any example, right? Where there's some significant net worth that's called tied up, right? Use real estate if you want. And there's an estate tax due, let's assume, right? How is that going to be paid? And that's where the life insurance can be, as you said, like explode with cash. You have it, pay that tax, because that tax is due in 9 months. So how are they going to come up with that money? And that was a little bit of the situation they were faced with, right? Or how are they going to pay this tax due on this? And that's a great thing where life insurance, it's there, right? Boom, tax. You don't have to make any decisions. You don't have to sell the business if you don't want to. You don't have to sell the property. You have flexibility and options with it. And I think that's one thing that we really like about using that in the estate plan.
Well, and by the way, I like what you just said. It's about flexibility and options. That's what it is. In life, we talk to our kids about this all the time, right? Do you want to have flexibility and options in your life? Or do you want to be chained to a desk? We talk about them from an employment perspective. When I was on the board of Junior Achievement, one of the board members always used to say, if you're self-employed, you'll never be unemployed, right? And I think that comes down to optionality, flexibility, and options. That's in the decisions that we make in our lives. And again, to talk about that and to touch on that a bit, you go to the gym every day or 5 days a week and you eat healthy and, manage your weight and all of those things. That gives you the flexibility and optionality not to drop dead of a heart attack. Get a physical once a year. Now, granted, genetics are going to play a role in all that, of course, but you take better care of yourself from a health perspective. You're not going to hurt your back. You'll be walking a lot longer. My grandfather was in a wheelchair, played fast pitch softball until he was 86 as a catcher, and then was in a wheelchair, had a lot of walking problems the last decade of his life. I don't want to have that happen. So what kind of things can you do to ensure that you've got the flexibility and options to live the kind of life that you want to have? That's whether it be in your health world, in your business life, in your estate planning. And why that's relevant to your estate planning, you have flexibility and options while you're alive. You've got the flexibility and options to make the decision that you want certain things to happen, and I'm going to paper those things. And what's most important is that you do them not tomorrow, you do them yesterday, right? It's important to get on it and at a very minimum have a basic estate plan, even if it requires some modification along the way. Have something in place that allows your loved ones to have some sense of what's supposed to happen And then by the way, it's something that's going to be reviewed regularly anyway. I mean, your estate plan is going to be changing and needing to be updated based on all kinds of life events, whether it be new marriage, divorce, children, illness, significant buying or selling of investment assets or business assets, changes in the laws or family dynamics, right? I mean, how many times have we heard that tragic story of he was such a great kid, but got addicted to drugs? And we've tried and we've put him in so many facilities and now we're just now done. If he decides to get his life together, we'll welcome him back with open arms. How many times have we heard that story? I've lost count. I've heard it so many times.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to the extent, you can build something that says, hey, this is what happens as long as you do the following. This is what happens if something, God forbid, happens to you that's unfortunate and unforeseen. We're going to make sure you're taken care of too. But most importantly, it gives you the flexibility and options to have that control. And I think in life, forgetting just what we're talking about in estate planning, everything we do in life is about flexibility and options. That's it. Everything else beyond that doesn't matter. You want to have flexibility and options.
Yeah. And needs and wants. And you brought that up. It just talks about, do you need an estate plan? Well, what is it that you want to have happen? What do you want? And then we could say, yep, you probably need an estate plan. So couple minutes remaining here. I'm sure we have some people listening that might be thinking, okay, I should probably start taking a look at this, or review or whatever it is. I need to get started. I need to get started on this path. What are some things people should do if they want to, start walking down that path of taking a look at their overall estate plan?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, the first step is always reaching out to your advisor. And by the way, I would say your advisor does not need to be your attorney or your CPA. It can be your financial advisor, trusted wealth manager. It could be your attorney, it can be your CPA. But I think having those discussions with someone that's not necessarily right on the clock building the document is not a bad thing, because it helps you uncover and discuss what's really on your mind.
Yeah.
Second, if you're married or have a significant other, really having a discussion around what is important to the family dynamic, what you want to have happen in that regard with children and all of that. That's something that's very, very important. Discussion. Papering. What it is you want to have happen if, God forbid, you became sick, disabled, mentally incapacitated, or you ultimately died. How do you want that to look? And then for the high net worth individuals out there that are really trying to think about what it is they want to have happen with regard to their estate to ensure that their kids and their kids' kids don't become those concerned individuals, that they're working hard and are, good assets in society. What does that look like? That's a whole nother set of discussions. At One Wealth, as we've got a process we take our clients through to help them identify some of these concerns, and we can build out those plans, then help get them with attorneys and CPAs to execute on their goals and wishes and dreams. So we can do that here as a firm, and we certainly do with our clients. So I think initially it's all about, the conversation that needs to start being had, and then ultimately bringing in your loved ones to buy in and understand what your goals and your objectives are. So I think that's a good way to close it. So Pete, I think this was a good topic today. Great conversation as always, man.
Yeah.
And for all of you that are listening, thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed another episode of One Path to Wealth. I am your host, Jeremy Dicker, the Hebrew Hammer, with my co-host, Peter Hoopis. Remember to click like if you enjoyed this episode, and subscribe to our blog, One Path to Wealth, and other exciting things you'll see on our website. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to One Path to Wealth podcast. Click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. Visit our website at www.onewealthmgmt.com or give us a call at 855-663-9584. And don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of One Wealth Management. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. Investment advisory services offered through One Wealth Capital Management, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Insurance solutions offered through One Wealth Management, Financial and Insurance Services, Inc.